Welcome to Media Makers Spotlight from Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. We bring you conversations with industry professionals for behind the screens, insight, and inspiration.
Today, I have a very, very special guest. He has over 150 credits in theater, film, television, voiceover work. Welcome, everyone. This is Media Maker Spotlight. I'm your host for this episode, Tara Jabari. Carl Lumbly is a well-respected, recognized, and certainly busy man. His most recent film project, Captain America: Brave New World, is where he returns playing Isaiah Bradley. And we're going to talk about that and some of his other projects. Welcome to the podcast, Carl. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tara. My pleasure.
So I'm going to geek out, but we'll be here for the reason why you did come here, because I don't want to get in trouble with Marvel and Disney. For me, how I have, even though you've been in so many things, the one that, can you guess which one I recognize you from the most? Do you sometimes know when a
Alias?
Yes. Oh my God. I was like, Dixon.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Alias.
Loved that show. Loved it. For me, I was like a 13-year-old girl when that show came out. I can't even remember, but I was young, a teen. And but I was raised on James Bond, and even the TV show Mission Impossible would kind of be on television. My mom's like, oh, come watch this show. And then the movie had come out. And so it was always males, and the woman was kind of like a side piece, or kind of like not. Now you had a woman who cried, who worried about her father and her, best friends and then her partner who she had to lie to is this man. And there was such a lovely relationship you and Sydney Bristow, you and Jennifer Garner had. And it was such a positive role model for girls, but for people to see. And it was so great. Oh, loved that show. Loved it. Oh, so
I love doing it. I have to tell you two things.
Yes, please do.
That helped me. One, I was raised with three sisters. I was an only boy. And so I was dissuaded very early that there was any difference between the capability that a girl had or a boy had. My sisters were astounding. And then I was also a mama's boy. Quite proud of it. I was my mother's favorite. My sisters can't dispute that. I challenged them to dispute that. And some of that, I believe, taught me in seeing the difference between the way my mother and my father moved in the world. I knew that there were roles that were supposed to apply. But it was also quite clear that it was situational. There were times when my mother, who was very, very soft, very sweet, very demure, very thoughtful, very spiritual, could put the fear of God in you when she was at that point. So there was, to me, it began to make some sense that there was a different way to wield power, to use power, but that it all comes from the same place. Both my parents loved us fiercely, and that's the way they operated. When it came to the relationship with Sydney Bristow, you can recognize brilliance, you can recognize excellence, and certainly if it's in a coworker, you see and and I think that for many women in certain corporate settings, in certain business situations, it was clear they were the bright ones. They were the sharp ones, but because of the way society was ordered, they had to report to a man who could then take their brilliance and move it forward. In this instance, she's a shining star. And at the point where the series starts, she has tremendous potential, but she is not seasoned. And I guess because wisdom is that marriage of intelligence and experience, that was what Dixon felt he was given the privilege of being a partner to, but also helping to kind of steward and help her know the decisions that she has to consider. Not help her make them, because she's too capable. She knows that. But there are things where if you aren't experienced, there are things you may or may not see. And also, I think Dixon, as people tend to be, especially if you have children yourself, is very protective. And it was a beautiful working relationship for me, the way we were able to work together. And then the way, as time moved forward, you saw that Dixon no longer had to, or felt he had to, herd on her instincts or be or guide. It was collegial, and it was a privilege to be able to have the partnership work as effectively as it did.
And then they had these other female, kind of spoiler, but it's been a while. They find out she has a half sister, or they meet this young woman who thinks she's working for the CIA and she's not.
Right.
Sydney, as well as Dixon and all the others, are like, well, we have to help mentor them. They're capable. Exactly. They're smart. So it was so sweet. And see, you're like, oh, the student.
And it was happening in a world that was ever changing and was based on a history that you could not write, but they did, involving a reach back centuries for everything from technology to, I don't know, wig parts. It just seemed like that we didn't know when we came in what necessarily we would be facing, what challenge, which villains would be emerging to try and upend the world. All we knew was that we had a responsibility, and we just try to do the best we can for as long as we can. And if we were unable to save the world, we would at least be going down with it.
Oh, you guys did such a great job. And it's been so nice to see, like, you guys sometimes have reunions, and I'm like, oh, they're together again. But you are here for Captain America is back, but not with Steve Rogers. And so is your character, who was introduced on screen from the miniseries Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Isaiah Bradley. So for people who might need a refresher or might not know, Isaiah Bradley was after Steve Rogers, who was given the super serum. They did it to a bunch of other people, but it was primarily African-American men during the Korean War.
Right.
And this is also based off of true stories, unfortunately. So it was based on the state of Alabama, the study.
Tuskegee, yes.
Tuskegee.
Right.
And this was true, which was basically the Tuskegee experiment was they were giving African-American men with syphilis, oh, we're going to give you these treatments and free medical care. And for 40 years, they actually were not. There was no justice, and many of them ended up dying. Similarly, they took that true event and they put it into Captain America comic books, the first one being in 2003, and used it to introduce the character of Isaiah Bradley, correct?
Absolutely. That's right.
And so now with Sam, what's the Anthony Mackie characters? Sam
Wilson.
Wilson. He is now Captain America.
That's correct.
And he doesn't have super serum, right?
No, he doesn't have super serum.
I always wonder about that. But he wants to bring some sort of recognition of all the other Captain Americas, including you, who has survived, but was also imprisoned, so that they can keep it a secret of what they did to you. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's coming out in February, which is also Black History Month. So I was curious on how did you personally, as well as the film, without giving any spoilers, but did you guys do any research, or how did you decide to kind of not shy away that the American history of wrongdoing, particularly against African-American people, and also still honor and move forward?
Well, I think I have to credit Marvel for that. It was their conception. So the timeline is there was Project Rebirth, and in that Steve Rogers accidentally became a super soldier, and the same individuals who conducted that project broke off and decided to form the Super Soldier Project, utilizing testing on Black GIs only to determine the right dosage of the serum. And unfortunately, in trying to find that proper dosage, 300 soldiers were killed and 7, I believe, made it out, Isaiah's character being one of them. Of that 7, through one mishap or another, it was whittled down until there was only one left, and there was a mission to try and destroy the super soldier camp and Camp Schwarzbitte, which was in Germany. Steve Rogers was supposed to be there for that. He was stuck on a ship in the Pacific, and the only individual who could pull it off was Isaiah Bradley. So he was essentially sent in for a suicide mission. It was not expected that he would survive. But he went in because, like so many Black men of that era, he not only believed in this country and loved this country, which I think is a key reason. I think it's very appropriate that this film is coming out during not only Black History Month, but on Valentine's Day. So there's, I think love is underestimated in the entire Marvel world by people who look at the world, because I think so much of what drives these individuals, in addition to having superpowers, which also have to be maintained in battle, but they're driven by the heart. And so that is why Isaiah did what he did. And unfortunately, because it was a secret and because they weren't exactly certain how he had survived, they framed him for having stolen the Captain America costume when he went on this mission that he was not expected to return from.
Right.
And when he was indeed returned, when he survived, I'll add, after having a meeting with Hitler and Goebbels, where they were deciding just exactly what to do with him and trying to entice him to fight for the Nazi cause. And that if he did and the Nazis won, they would free all Black people. Well, obviously cynical. And one of the lines I love, and for me it typifies the character, is after they're pitched to him to come over and join the other side, he says, "Guys, no, my wife would kill me." And he's a young man who left a pregnant wife, and while he was away, she gave birth to his daughter, and he never met the daughter, and that was the last he had seen of his wife. So that was the kind of sacrifice that was potentially possible, but that he was willing to make, because not only for love of country, but for love of self and love for his people, and a belief that in curing the racial problem, it would cure America. And I think that belief is still true and still here. So Sam Wilson is atypical, and no, he doesn't have the serum, but I think he has something much more important. He has the love. He has the heart. He comes from social work, and he wants to right wrongs, allow voices that are unheard to be heard, and see if we don't have other ways of bringing ourselves together through listening and finding the same love that we have inside ourselves and other people.
And Isaiah's grandson, he did get to know his grandson. According to the comics, the grandson becomes Captain America. We don't know that in the films. We shall know. So there is some sort of, it's not like a happy ending, but at least Isaiah does get to know his family that he did have to sacrifice that time with.
Yes, and so to make clear, we're speaking about the comic book, the Truth, that 7 part comic series, and of course the Falcon and the Winter Soldier took Isaiah in certain other directions. But yes, that's the story, that's the source story, and I credit Marvel again for creating that story.
Is there anything that you wanted to share about this film and the trajectory of how Marvel has moved on, or Captain America, or what it represents, not just Steve Rogers to Sam Wilson to the introduction of Isaiah?
Well, first I'll share that I was never a comic book person, so this is all kind of a brand new world for me. And one of the things that I think is underestimated about what Marvel did is I think the theme of love runs through this entire universe. People looking for love, people who were betrayed in love, people who have all this love to give and no place to put it, people who don't have all of the powers or all of the resources, but because they are so grounded in this sense of all of us sharing this common urge, which is an urge to love, to be safe, to be protected, to understand those kinds of things. I believe if you can elicit that in people, that is a superpower. And so I think the Marvel world has a tremendous amount of fantastic things that are happening, but it is always bound by those relationships between people, and generally those relationships are so strong. The difference between love and hatred is only a tiny, tiny, tiny line. So I think it is all about love, and I think that for me, approaching Isaiah from that standpoint, it becomes the challenge of, if you have loved and been betrayed, do you have the capacity to love again? And so that's where I fasten. That's where I hook into.
Yeah,
the Marvel world.
Well, it's very exciting to see this, and it was funny when I was like, I'm getting to interview Carl Lumbly and for the new Captain America, and they're like, I thought he died, and I'm like, no, remember Anthony Mackie's him again, and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, okay. So, and then they were like, that's going to be interesting and exciting and all that stuff. So, but with that comes a lot of things that I'm glad that they're not shying away from.
No, I would say it's a brave new world for everyone. And I think part of what I get from my brief time here in the Marvel world is that everyone has within them this capacity to be super heroic. I remember when I was young and I read about this idea of hysterical strength. A woman's child is pinned underneath the wheel of a car, and without thinking, without doing anything, she runs and she lifts the bumper of the car and she frees her child. What are we capable of? What is inside us when everything is meshed with a desire to see the safety of a loved one or for our own safety? It's we have capacities within us, and that's one of the brilliant things about Sam Wilson, Anthony Mackie's Captain America, is that he's maximizing that. And I suppose by suggestion, that means if he, as a non-powered human being,
superpower, he's
can
like
do
an everyday
these things, then maybe we can look again at what superpower is really about.
It's exciting. So I do want to also, when I was thinking about that, I'm like, oh, he's now in the Marvel universe. Comic books are so beloved. Marvel is so beloved. But you also you've been almost in everything. But one thing is that you were playing in Doctor Sleep as Dick Halloran.
Yes.
And that's a whole other group of very passionate fan base.
Yes, so I learned.
Oh, you didn't expect? I was like, oh, this is going to be tough for these guys. Because there was the book, which I had read, and it's scary. And then the film is the sequel to The Shining.
Right.
Right. And of course, the more famous version of The Shining, Scatman Crothers had played him in the 1980 version. There's a mini series that actually Stephen King liked better. Melvin Van Peebles? Peebles, thank you. Played him. So what was that like when you got the part and you're like, oh, okay, great. Were you nervous? Were you scared? Or you're like, I'm going to do this? Because you guys did a great job, honestly.
Oh, thank you so much, Tara. I was scared the way I am scared whenever I get a role because, you fight for it so hard and you're making this case. Yes, I will do it. Yes, I can do it. I can do it if you give it to me. If you give it to me, I can do it. And then they give it to you and, I have to do it. So, yes, there is that. But it's also, it's the joy of, and the opportunity and the privilege, especially of playing a character like that, having done by an actor like Scatman, who had done such a beautiful job. And I think for me, I wanted to do both things simultaneously, continue what he had done with Dick Halloran and apply my own sense of who the character was. I will say, I must credit the brilliant Mike Flanagan, who joyously and enthusiastically instills confidence in you with his assumption that you're as capable and excited to do the best work possible as he is. I think I've been fortunate in many projects because I've worked with people who want and expect that you'll operate at the top of your intelligence and who assume that you might not know what the top of your intelligence is, but be willing to go there. And every character I've ever done has felt like climbing a mountain. And so each stage is, the initial ascent and then getting to base camp and then finally, trying to tackle that summit. If I'm being honest, sometimes you don't quite make it to the summit, but you're on the mountain and you haven't fallen off. And I think that sometimes sounds a little fatalistic now that I'm saying it out loud, but that is how I feel about it. I think very often it involves taking a leap of faith. In this instance, it involves shaving my head. Massive leap of faith. But worth it because I also think that what Dr. Sleep talked about was, post-traumatic stress and the way the generations can pass that on from father to son, from mother to daughter, and how at some point we have to be aware of the degree to which our past affects our present. It's not really in the past, it's in the present with us. And that's what we carry into the future.
And what I notice, again, we all know that Mike Flanagan is very talented, and you guys worked again for House of Usher, and you worked again for a film that's coming out of release hopefully this summer, which I'd be happy if you'd come back. But he also got Stephen King to reanalyze the original the 1980 version of The Shining. He's like, you know what? I get it now why people love it so much. And we're like, he did the impossible. Because, like you said, he was able to kind of get people to see the art or the expressions. And that's really
I think, and I suppose I keep coming back to this love theme because I think anything that of all the things we deal with in superheroes, I think love is the most powerful superpower that we have. And since we're humans and we all have that, then I think that's something that may help explain the attachment to the fantastic. It's nice to imagine that we're all capable of the fantastic.
Well, I had read that you call or describe yourself as a library geek, and that you studied English in college, but I couldn't really find anything that you have written. So I was just curious. It's been all acting.
Yes.
Were you ever interested in writing or any other aspects other than the acting?
Well, I was in journalism before I started acting, and right now my only writing project is a one-man show on James Baldwin, who's one of my favorite authors, and who is one of those figures who is quoted all the time, but his life was so instructional, and that's the point of view from which I'm trying to present my sense of who he was.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. And is it out? Like, are you performing it? Or
I did a workshop of it about 5 years ago, and then I'm trying to fit my writing in around all of this activity that is taking place right now. But I am determined. It's the only thing in my bucket list.
Oh, I hope to see it. That's awesome. And then the other thing is that, so last year, you received a Legend Award from the Caribbean Heritage Organization. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I had noticed, like, from all the years, many of your old colleagues, including people from Alias, and even your old friend Danny Glover, where you guys had both started on your first on-screen and Escape to Alcatraz, and everyone from like 80s and 90s and stuff.
Tyne Daly, yeah. It was a wonderful tribute, a wonderful event, and I felt like it was an award for my parents, because anything I've ever done, I feel like it's been as a representative of those people who produced me, not only my parents, but my sisters and people I worked with. So I was very honored.
It showed to me over these many years of working, people kept coming back to you to support you. And it showed you have something that people were like, this is a person I will always support. And do you have any advice, or what do you attribute to that kind of loyalty and success? Like, how did you build those relationships that you want to share with people so that you have that throughout your career?
I respect what I do, and I assume, I assume that other people who do the work that I'm doing deserve my respect, and that I'm going to come back to it again. I love the work, I love the people who do it, and I believe that operating from the heart is the key. It makes you listen, and it also takes you out of yourself, because we work in a collegial situation and a collaborative artistic endeavor. It's key that you listen, and there is a sense that all of us together can make something that is so much greater than our individual efforts. So it's wonderful to be on top of your game, and it's wonderful to do a beautiful job with your character. But it's meaningless if the entirety of the project isn't realized. So a writer hands you a text, you have a responsibility, and the only way to fulfill that responsibility is the people around you. So I love myself and I love them.
That is beautifully said. Thank you so much. Is there anything that we haven't touched base on that you'd like to share before we head out?
No, but I would like to highlight that The Life of Chuck, which I am so looking forward to seeing, is one of the most beautiful statements that I think is absolutely timely. I think in watching it, people will come to appreciate what a joy, what a privilege we have in being alive. And that's something that we should not take for granted.
And Life of Chuck is the latest project you did with Mike Flanagan.
Yes.
It premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in 2024.
Right.
And we're all waiting in anticipation for a trailer or something, but it was a huge success of rave reviews and everything. So us fans are like, But what happened? And then it was released that there was distribution. So hopefully it comes out later this year. And it's based on Stephen King's works? Or can you tell us a bit?
It's a short story that Stephen King wrote. And I think it's one of those situations where I'm not sure Stephen King expected that it could be a film. But once again, Mike Flanagan, who I think, he's one of those people where, how somebody would say, well, I think that's impossible. You can't do that. I think Mike Flanagan is one of those individuals who says, well, maybe it is impossible, but were it possible, what would it look like? And he goes from there. And so convinced, I think, Mr. King to just take a listen to an idea, and he loved it. And I'm very excited about both these projects for different reasons, in different ways. But I look forward to this as a year where I got lucky twice.
Yes, it's been so great speaking with you, and thank you so much for your time. And we'll definitely share more information as it comes along. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tara. Good day to you.
Thanks for listening to Media Maker Spotlight from Women in Film and Video. To learn more about WIF, visit wif.org. This podcast is created by Sandra Abrams, Candace Block, Brandon Ferry, Tara Jabari, and Jerry Reinhardt, and edited by Michelle Kim and Inez Perez, with audio production and mix by Steve Lack Audio. Subscribe to continue learning from more amazing media makers. Please visit MediaMakersSpotlight.com for more information.